Good evening, everyone. My name is Rudy Page, and welcome to Windrush 75 Communities. We're so pleased to host I'll host this community consultation on the Windrush Anchor Memorial Project. And I'm so pleased that Patrick Vernon, who is going to take us through all the details, is here. And I'm going to head straight over to Patrick. Great to see you, Patrick. Hope all is well.
Yeah, I'm fine again, and thanks very much, Rudy, for hosting and facilitating this conversation community, and obviously the work that you're doing also in terms of Windrush 75 as well.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to you, and I'll come in at the end and just give an overview of some of the things that we'll be doing over the next couple of years. Thank you.
Okay. So welcome, listeners, and thank you for participating and listening to this conversation. It's a consultation in many ways. We started this process about over 2 years ago, and myself and my fellow partner David Mearns, we're going to be explaining to you the importance of why we do this project and how you can get involved and support this. But as a kind of a preamble, as you know, there's been a lot of talk about Windrush history. I mean, the work of the late Sam King and Arthur Torrington from the Windrush Foundation have done a lot of work to commemorate the Windrush generation, particularly those who were the pioneers that came off the ship in 1948. But the concept of Windrush is much wider than that. It applies to lots of people that came from on ships and planes, on different ways from the Caribbean in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. I mean, I also personally see Windrush as those people coming from Africa, because it's all about black migration and settlement. We all know that there hasn't been that much formal recognition in British society of the Windrush generation. I remember writing an article about this about 10 years ago, that we should do more. And there's been a concept of Windrush Day, which was first started back in 1998 by Sam King, who was one of the Windrush pioneers. And every decade there has always been events around that. But I suppose how I got involved with the Host of Windrush was really from about 2008-9. And start that process working with a whole range of individuals and organisations. But why can't we have Windrush Day as an annual event? Why should we wait a decade? And also to get the formal recognition of governments linked with resources as well. Sadly, that happened. That was because of the Windrush scandal in 2018, where the government, Theresa May, who was then Prime Minister, was forced to admit that they treated the Windrush generation poorly around the whole Windrush scandal, because of the hostile environment policy, and at the same time acknowledged Windrush Day at the same time, which was formally adopted by this government in 2019 and has led to various grant schemes. But this project, which we want to share with you tonight, started before the Windrush scandal in many ways, and it was really part of that conversation to explore how there should be some kind of recognition in terms of memorials. There are some memorials, not many at all. There have been a range of stuff in museum archives over the years. There have been art, there have been installations, there have been murals around the country celebrating Windrush, but there's never been any proper official or even a proper recognition which reflects the history. If you go around London and the major cities in Britain, you won't see a proper recognition memorial with a statue or some kind of recognition. I mean, it's only the last going back about 10 years ago that in Lambeth they adopted Windrush Square. Yeah, and you know, and obviously since then there's been other aspects of Windrush history. You've got Nubian Jack, who has worked tirelessly hard with his blue plat schemes, but also obviously he was involved with the support of people in the community for his memorial, recognising those contributed to the First and Second World War, not just from the Caribbean, but basically black soldiers and women, men and women, etc. And then last year he did another memorial recognising Windrush nurses. There've been all kinds of events, but nothing of something that has that legacy. As you're probably aware, again linked to the Windrush scandal, the government also acknowledged this, and Baroness Philip Benjamin is leading the Windrush Memorial, which will be unveiled later on this year, during Windrush Day, I think, at Waterloo Station. But this project, which my colleague David Mearns will go into much detail, is about the Windrush ship. People never think about the Windrush ship. They think about the individuals. They think about what it meant to be that journey from the Caribbean, particularly from the 24th of May onwards, when people arrived in 21st of June, actually, in the evening, and the legacy of that. But people haven't really thought about what happens to the ship. We're going to explain to you where the ship is. We're going to explain to you the history of the ship, and we're going to explain to you its significance, which we can explore a bit later on in our conversation as well. And it's been a team effort, I have to say, for a number of people. There's a colleague, Max Holloway, who was the idea initially about this idea of the anchors. But it's really when I got on board, and then later David also Mearns got on board. That's when we realised that this was something much bigger, more important around that, about this history and this recognition, which is really important for the community. We've worked we've contributed in blood, sweat, and tears, and that recognition has not been, I believe, not been fully acknowledged. It's only been because of the scandal that people have been now sensitized to this history and this contribution, even though we have known it for ourselves for many years, many decades. And the question we need to ask ourselves as we approach 75th anniversary of Windrush next year, what are you going to do in your communities, wherever you are in the country, or whatever you are involved in? How are we going to make sure that this recognition is properly reflected? I hope this project will be one of many other projects and campaigns around this recognition history. So what I'd like to do now is to invite David Mearns. Unfortunately, he's got problems with the camera, so you can't see him, but he does exist. I know that because I've been working with him for the last 2.5 years. And he will go into a PowerPoint presentation, explain a bit about this campaign around the Windrush Anchor Memorial. So David, when you're ready.
Right. Well, thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Rudy, for hosting this consultation. I hope everybody can see the screen in front of you with my presentation.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. As Patrick said, I'm and maybe the long distance. I'm actually talking from Los Angeles, so it's early morning here, bright sunny day, and unfortunately you can't see my face, but that's actually that's probably fortunate because my face is important. But hopefully, what I'm going to present in this short presentation is not only informative but also touches people in a way that they begin to support the project actively as any way they can. And really, to start it off, we're calling this the Windrush Anchor Memorial Project, and the vision, the intent, is to recover the anchor that you can see in the center of that photograph from the shipwreck of the Empire Windrush, and to use it as a centerpiece for a national monument to the contributions that the Windrush generation have made to multicultural Britain. And as Patrick said, there isn't a broad monument or statue or anything so far that exists in the country that recognizes that contribution. And this picture really says it all. And this is one of the reasons why the anchor was chosen. Whenever the Empire Windrush or the Windrush generation, more specifically, is mentioned, is discussed in the media, in books, in television, this is the photograph you see. This is the Windrush at Tilbury dock when it arrived in London, 22nd of June, 1948, carrying the first wave of Caribbean immigrants to the UK. It was the only voyage the Windrush made in terms of bringing people to it. But because it was the first one, and because it's been captured this way with this amazing photograph of all these men, a mixture of the crew of the ship and the immigrants with their arms outstretched, joyously outstretched, starting a new life in the UK, it really sort of speaks to the symbolism of the start of those waves of immigration. And what's really important about that, even though the ship is going to be a subject of what we're doing, and the anchor is obviously connected to the ship, what we're trying to recognize here is the people, their journey, the original Windrush immigrants, their descendants, and so on, and what they had started. So really, that's the story that ultimately we want to tell and connect it physically through that anchor in terms of the monument. And that anchor, we hope, will be a touchstone for people to visit that monument, to see it, physically put their hands on it, and that will connect them to the experience of their families. And that will be an experience that not just people connected to the Windrush generation can enjoy, but all of Britain can enjoy. And that's what monuments do. And the idea, as Patrick was saying, is many years in the genesis of it, and it started with Max Holloway in the picture at the back. And this was the beginning of our small sort of group of people, core team, that was working on this. And Max had the idea in memory of his late wife, whose parents came from St. Lucia to the UK in the 1950s. And when Max's wife passed, he felt a strong need to do something to recognize her life, her parents' life, and the broader Windrush generation. And that's where he came up with the idea of the anchor. And this was a meeting that we had at the end of 2019, before we were all sort of disrupted by the pandemic. But Max's research into the anchor was really significant, because anchors are a recognized symbol of hope. They are a provocative and powerful metaphor for strength, stability, permanence, and belonging. And that's basically the values that the people from the Windrush generation were looking to have when they came to the UK to settle. And those, so the anchor is actually a very good metaphor for their experience and their hope in coming to the UK. And that's where the anchor comes from. So we started to have, at the end of 2019, very small consultations with the community. Unfortunately, that was disrupted. We're now able, through the internet and Zoom consultations like this, to reach a much larger audience, both live and in a recorded form. But things really kicked into high gear at the end of last year, when Patrick was successful in getting this issue raised in Parliament during a debate with the Home Office about compensation. And this is Kit Malthouse. He's an MP. He's a minister in the Home Office. And this was a statement he made that really, as I said, kicked things into high gear for us.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Windrush scandal is a stain on this country's conscience. And we owe it to those who suffered as a result to deliver lasting and meaningful change and ensure nothing like this ever happens again. And I'm happy to say that as we celebrate today that generation, and hopefully in the years to come on Windrush Day, the Department for Transport is currently investigating whether the anchor from the Windrush can be recovered and restored to become a fitting memorial to that generation.
Now, that was a remarkable achievement for Patrick to get that debated on the floor of the House in Parliament. And since then, we've been able to have meetings online with the shipping minister responsible for the Windrush. It's owned by the UK government. It's owned by the Department for Transport. So their permission is something that we would be seeking. And those have been very positive discussions so far. And part of that was that we wanted to make sure that we were able to now restart or reinitiate much broader consultations with a number of communities that have that are considered stakeholders in terms of the Windrush, the ship, but also the Windrush Generation. Now, to talk about some of the practicalities, the ship itself, the Windrush itself, sank in 1954, completely unrelated. It was passing through the Western Mediterranean, taking British families of servicemen and the servicemen from the Far East home when there was an engine room fire. In that fire, 4 people were killed, but nearly 1,500 were evacuated and survived in a very short period of time. So it was a very big event. It was covered but with television and newsprint. So there's an awful lot of information available to somebody like me, a shipwreck hunter, to use to actually locate the wreck. And that box off on the left of the map is the most probable sinking position and where we would search. It's about 24 nautical miles off the coast of Algeria in the Western Mediterranean. It's in somewhat deep water, 2,780 meters. We already have a bathymetric map. That colored strip actually shows the contours of the continental shelf where the ship lies. So we have very good information on what the seabed would look like. We know what the depth would look like. And even though that seems to be a very deep, it's a depth that we regularly work out, and actually we work much deeper. So that is not the problem for us. And also the information is so good. I have a very high level of confidence that we'll be able to find the shipwreck and then go on to recovering the anchor.
This is Movie Time. Leslie Mitchell reporting. An explosion in the engine room of the British troopship Empire Windrush killed 4 men and started a fire which spread rapidly through the ship. 1,500 men, women and children were on board, returning from the Far East. With the flames growing in intensity, the situation could have become a disaster, but there was no panic. Everybody behaved with calm and good humor. It says much for all concerned that the rescue operations were completed without further loss of life. The burning vessel was later taken in tow by a destroyer, but the fire was beyond control. The Empire Windrush went down completely burnt out.
And that shows you the type of coverage that we have, the type of information we have. As it was said, the ship was actually being towed by a Navy destroyer when it sank. So we have multiple positions, high quality positions where it actually went down. But the key of this image, and that's why I've stopped it here, is you could see that the ship was being burnt, basically from stem all the way to the stern. But the very tip of the stern, the one that's facing us in that screen, where the anchor sits, you can see it's white. It isn't black. So the fire didn't extend all the way to the location where the anchor is. So I believe the anchor will be in relatively almost the same condition as you would see in that photograph from 1948. Now we find shipwrecks using acoustic devices called side scan sonar. In the old days, we used to tow these instruments behind the ship. It was a long, laborious, expensive way of doing it. These days, we use autonomous vehicles. And not only can we use one, we can use multiple ones. So we're very efficient at locating wrecks. When we find them on the seabed and a ship like the Windrush, the way it sank, it would have been completely flooded. It didn't break on the surface. It would land on the seabed in basically intact and upright. So being able to get access to the anchor itself will be fairly straightforward. And this is the type of image that we'll be looking at. And even if the ship sinks into the mud, you can see how high the anchor is up on the stern. So even if the mud line was just below the the name of London, we'll be working well above that in an area that's very clear and free of obstructions. Now, how do we get the anchor off the ship, doing the least amount of disturbance to the vessel itself? And that's because we have these tremendous photographs, really high quality photographs, that we can see that the anchor is actually being held to the stern with just a couple of brackets. And Max, who's a graphic designer, has been able to show that image where we'll be cutting away the anchor. So all it will take will be a couple of cuts on these brackets, these bolts that are going to the red brackets on the right side of the image. And even at 3,000 meters, we can do that using a remotely operated vehicle that will have a manipulator arm and can deploy a cutting tool like this one. And this next video will show you how efficient and how quickly that can be done. So this is a spring-loaded circular saw that is just basically cutting through a steel pipe once you grab onto it. And we'll need to make about 4 of those cuts to be able to release the anchor and then recover it to the surface. It will then be conserved, and there will be later on a charitable trust is being formed to conduct a competition of artists to be able to design a suitable monument using the anchor as the centerpiece. And we're calling this a people's monument because it's not going to be decided by some secret committee that nobody has insight to. It will be as public as possible. And there will be a lot of people will be able to get their feedback to it. And that's part of this consultation. And to give you an idea of the scale and our commitment, Max commissioned this cardboard artist, somebody who's very experienced in making objects out of cardboard. And this is a life-size replica of the Windrush anchor, absolutely true to scale, that is being used as part of our educational program. And hopefully this anchor will be able to travel around the country to schools, to libraries, to museums, and be used in the lead up while the anchor is being conserved to explain to people. But you can see the size of it and can just imagine as a monument somewhere in the country, and that's still to be decided. And again, that will be based on public consultation. That it would be a substantial monument, a large object. And we've noticed recently there has been some chatter online about our motivations or people's motivations in doing this. And I just want to point out that this is this is being done on a voluntary basis. Patrick, Max, and I are all given our time to this. This is not something anybody's, it's a complete pro bono exercise. You know, we're donating our own funds to it, but most importantly, we're donating our own labor. And I think that's the most valuable thing you can give to somebody. And the last thing I want to show is two television production companies that we have been in consultation with and we're working with for over nearly 2 years now, to make sure that the entire expedition to find the wreck, to recover the anchor, and the entire process of converting that anchor into a monument is covered so that the public is aware of it. And this was the teaser that was created to show that.
Arrivals at Tilbury. The Empire Windrush, citizens of the British Empire coming to the mother country with good intent.
When the Empire Windrush docked in Tilbury on 21st of June 1948, Britain changed forever.
6 years after that famous voyage to London, the Empire Windrush was being used as a transport vessel, and it was moving through the Western Mediterranean when there was an engine room fire. The next day it sank. But the records of that loss still exist, and they convince me that I can find the wreck.
I'm blinded by your grace. I'm blinded by your grace, by your grace.
I know where to look. I know the equipment to use. I know we can find the Windrush.
When we find her, we want to bring a piece of her back home to where she belongs.
I'm blinded by your Lord, I've been broken. Though
I think this is it.
I'm worthy, you fix me.
It's part of British history, and it's a history that we should be proud of, history that we should never forget. We wouldn't have a modern Britain if it wasn't for the Windrush Generation.
Patrick said some important things in that video that I think are worth repeating. The Empire Windrush is an important part of Britain's history. It's history that is worth remembering, and that's the reason why we're doing this. And again, thank you for the time. And I'll stop sharing my screen so you can continue the consultation.
Thanks for that, David. Each time I see the presentation, I get these little hairs on goosebumps, because this is about history. As you know, some of you know, I do a lot of stuff around history for the community, and this is part of our history, which I don't think many people are aware. I mean, if we did an opinion poll, people wouldn't think that the Windrush ship existed, and it does exist. So this is an opportunity. Obviously, it's important that David hasn't got his camera working, but I'm sure he'll do his best to respond to any particular questions. Just to recap, we want to try and go to the Med. We want to retrieve the anchors from the ship, bring it back to the UK, have it preserved, but at the same time, we want to have a dialogue with the community and different stakeholders where this should be. Should this be in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, whatever? We want to have a process to find out where it should be. As well, there's obviously an opportunity for it to be a touring monument, but we want to find definitely a permanent location for this as well. The other thing that we want to do is, obviously, this is a tool to educate and inform and to engage with schools and the Windrush Generation themselves. We would like to try and do this in time for the 75th anniversary next year. We have to raise money to do this, and we've worked out we need about, I mean, maybe David, you might want to explain about the type of the usual costs associated for this kind of scale of activity and what we're hoping to do, Dave. I don't want to say a few words about that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's a little bit difficult to put a precise number on it, because what we want to do is get a vessel that's capable of doing it. There are not that many that is actually in the Western Mediterranean at the right time of the year, so that we don't have to pay high charges. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds, not millions, but hundreds of thousands. And the point I want to make about that is that this is not going to be government sponsored. We're not going to the government asking or requesting a financial contribution, because we think that the government's focus should be on the compensation scheme, and that what we're doing doesn't interfere with that or take any attention or any finance from that, because that should be the priority for the people who are still suffering. And so this is why we're doing a completely privately, publicly funded expedition, not something that is going to be that the government needs to put their hands in their pockets for, or the taxpayer it will be fronting. So that answers that question. And the last thing I want to mention, in addition to the people you've seen, Patrick, Max, the two production companies, the names were shown, Rogan Productions and Mallance and Sadler, a major London-based, well, global law firm, Ince & Co, have also joined the campaign on a pro bono basis, and they're providing us with an incredible amounts of legal advice and organizational advice, administrative advice. So this has really, we've been able to attract some very serious people, and it's now to the point that we, with the restrictions released, that we can have more events, and we wish to have more consultations online, but also public events, and get this, spread this word around the country. If things go well, we believe that we'd be able to start the operation this summer. That's a possibility, but it very much relies on subject to finance. Everything else more or less is in place. We know where to go. We know what our plan is. We already have basically unanimous support for the people that we've consulted with, but obviously events like this will reach more and more people. But the feedback that we're getting is that this is a worthwhile thing to do. It will be the type of monument that the people will be proud of, obviously that the Windrush descendants will be proud of, but hopefully that Britain across the country will see as a monument that is worthy. And as Patrick said, it will retell that history of that first voyage and what it meant to those people. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just to add to what David said. So we've started initially a fundraiser campaign on GoFundMe. We still have a link for that. We've raised £7,000, but we now want to target high net worth individuals and corporates to support this initiative. We do not want to go to the British government for any money at all. The other thing that we do want from the British government is their blessing, because as David said, technically speaking, the ship belongs to the British government because it was part of the spoils of war during the Second World War. That's what we want, and we've actually had some positive conversations with the government regarding that. One of the things which we would like from these consultation meetings is we're trying to get as many letters of support from the community to support this initiative. And if you are happy to do so, I'll put my email in the chat, and we can actually give us a form of wording that if that helps. But what we would look for is if we could have as many letters from the community to say that we support this initiative, we want the government to be behind this, and we believe that this, if this comes up, this will be a fitting memory and tribute to the Windrush Generation and for Britain itself as well. So that's what we're looking for. And also, as if we know we stopped the operation process, we want to then have a continued dialogue about where this monument should go as well as part of that process.
Right, thanks for that. There is a question in the chat to put to you, Patrick, about National Lottery Fund. What is your position on that?
It's very straightforward. I used to be an assessor for the National Lottery, and I know what they fund and what they don't fund. I don't think they would fund us going all the way to the Mediterranean to retrieve the anchors. What they would fund, and that's something that we will seriously consider, is maybe doing stuff around elements, maybe some elements of the preservation, or maybe developing education materials and resources to support the telling of that story, basically. But it wouldn't really cover the operational costs of that David explained around getting the anchor, basically.
Right, okay. In fact, there's a couple of thoughts I had as well. Obviously, you can share the link, the Crown, Just Giving, did you say?
Yeah, so what we'll do, there's a we'll
share on the website.
We've got a website that where you can some more details about what we're trying to do. So I'll put that in there in the chat.
Right, and there's also
sorry,
carry on.
Yes, sorry, yes, and I'll put my email address if anyone wants to contact me directly, if they want to do a letter of support from their organisation, no matter what size of organisation, any letter of support will be really appreciated.
Right, and I was going to ask you then about education pack, whether there could be, even if it was on the website or a PDF document that outlined some of the key points that have been laid out today.
Well, we've got a website which has everything as information there ready. Again, that Max, I don't know if he's still online here with us, but he's designed and got lots of information, and we'll try and update that regularly. So I'll definitely let me get the link and I can do that in the chat.
Okay, and we will be rebroadcasting this show on Fresh FM Radio London and throughout various social media platforms, because it is an important legacy project for the community as a whole. I'm just also thinking about what other ways that we could just keep it on the agenda, really.
Yeah, anything. Obviously, we welcome any suggestions. As you know, we're approaching this year the 74th anniversary of Windrush. So we want to raise that, as you know, part of the wider conversation with a number of people about what should we do on Windrush 75. So hopefully we'll be definitely talk about the role of the anchor as well, and its significance. Because I think one of the key things, yes, I mean it's going to cost a fair amount of money to do this operation, and everyone's doing it pro bono, to the bone to try and do this. And actually, if you look at how much money is spent in Britain on, I'm not talking about revenue funding, I'm just talking about funding memorials, capital costs around memorials. There's not much money spent in real terms around memorials. Okay, I know there's going to be the project done by Baroness Benjamin, and the government's going to give £1 million towards that. But actually, if you look at other memorials, not much money's been spent at all in real terms. So I think in terms of we want donations from individuals. If you can remember the Mary Seacole campaign, that took 13-14 years to raise the money to have that statue unveiled in 2016. Obviously, we're looking for probably the same amount of money, but in a less time, basically. So, we do want support of the community. We do want support of high net worth individuals, and anyone that's got connections with corporates. That'd be really appreciated as well. I mean, I think in the context of Black Lives Matter, a number of corporates made promises and pledges to support the community around skills, employment, health. What about legacy of history as well? I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going back to that recognition of the contribution of the Windrush generations, and that it's actually marked somewhere in this country.
No, absolutely. I mean, next year as a 75th anniversary, and I've said this before online, that this is going to be one of the last times that the elders that are still alive, because a lot of them died during the pandemic, as you know, but those elders for that generation are still alive. This is going to be the last time they'll be around, so we can talk to them, engage with them, and acknowledge their contributions. It'd be fantastic if we had the anchor, wherever it is in the country, and people could just visit it and touch it. I mean, David, can I bring you in here? Can you talk about one particular operation that you were involved in, very similar to Windrush, which had a similar impact, which I believe will happen around people recognition and acknowledgement?
Sure. This I found a very famous British shipwreck called HMS Hood. It was lost in World War II in battle with Bismarck, and this was an apocalyptic battle, epic battle between these two vessels. And of the 1,418 men who were killed on, or that served on Hood, all but 3 were lost. So it is the largest loss in British naval history, 1,415 men. And I found that wreck on the 60th anniversary of the battle between the two ships. And in the debris field, we spotted a bell, which is quite remarkable because the ship is 50,000 tons of steel spread over kilometers of the seabed. And on the first dive, we located the bell in the debris field. And unbeknownst to us, while that operation was going on, and this was happening in 2001, we didn't have internet on the ship. We had no communications with land. The country was debating whether we should have actually recovered that bell. We didn't do anything like that because the wreck of Hood is a massive war grave. So we would do it on a look but don't touch basis. However, that started this debate and the idea that bell, such a key object from the ship, and also one that was at risk for somebody else recovering it on an unauthorized basis, should be recovered. And ultimately, I was able to find a sponsor, and this was Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, who provided his fishing tools to recover the bell, which we were able in 2015 and conserved. And, it was donated to the National Museum of the Royal Navy in Portsmouth, and it is now in the galleries of the museum. It is one of the most visited objects of all. It had amazing writing on it nobody ever expected to see. And when it was first exhibited, actually, this frame being so the people who were seeing this bell afterwards, they were tons of people served on hoods. The grand.
We're just losing you, David. So, Patrick, are there any other key elements to that story?
I think the point that David was trying to make was very similar operation. The difference was that this was a war grave because so many soldiers died, and you know, but they did it. And David and his team did it. Brought it back there, and this bell was preserved, and it was a touchstone for families, service personnel who could be connected with that history. Just imagine, I mean, to say, for example, the Windrush anchor was in Trafalgar Square or Brixton or in Birmingham or Manchester, and you can literally go up to it. That will have such a powerful connection. I mean, I know some people say, "Oh, my parents I never went to the Windrush ship. My parents never went to the Windrush ship." That's not the point about with your parents. It's about that the symbolism.
Symbolism.
Oh, it's a symbolism. What it connects us with.
Yeah.
A lot of our history is temporal.
Yeah.
You go to a great exhibition in a museum or art gallery about our history. Within 3 months, 6 months, it's gone.
Yeah.
There is nothing permanent about our history in this country. I'm not joking at all. And so this would be something that we can say, hold on, this is something that we can do. Yeah.
And that's part of the legacy, because generations, people can easily be forgotten.
Yeah.
Just not written about, not mentioned. So,
we've got the books. I mean, we could do some more books. I mean, we have.
I mean,
there's lots of fictional stuff. I mean,
that living legacy, that you know, that's visible.
Yeah,
as you said before, that demonstrates the recognition and from the whole of society as well, not just the community ourselves, given the generations that would have.
No, absolutely, and also I think the key thing is about educating not just us, but Britain as well. I think this is really, really important. I think if we one lesson that we can learn from the Windrush scandal, people understood our narrative. They understood why we came here as migrants, as invited people to contribute to post-war Britain. And this, we have to remind people about this time and time and time again.
Yeah,
really, really important.
Great. Okay, I think we've covered all the key points for this first consultation. we're committed in terms of our Windrush 75 Communities Legacy Programme. We're committed to help amplify the message and host a series of these consultations. And we'll be big groups, small groups, you know, different part of our communities. We've got all different types of people that make up our communities, of course. So we're pleased to be part of this. And
no, really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And as I said before, I mean, I think it's, you know, we want to try and have as many of these events as well. And just to and I'll put my email in the chat. If anybody wants to support the campaign by writing a letter of support, it'd be really greatly appreciated, because we want to submit these letters to the government along with other letters that we're starting to receive from other stakeholders about supporting this campaign and the importance of why we need to have the anchor here in the UK.
Yeah, why the anchor should return to the UK.
Yeah,
you know, that's, and there's a, and as was set out in the very beginning, the symbolism of the anchor and the importance of it and what the anchor means, that does speak to the Caribbean experience in this country. So I believe the more we can get our communities to understand their friends and families and friends of the Caribbean communities as well, because obviously we're a diverse, well mixed in community.
Yes.
I think the more we can do that, the better, especially with Windrush 75 next year.
No, absolutely.
So Patrick, I'm going to leave the last word with you for this consultation.
Well, I said before, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to David and myself about what we're going to do. We think it's doable. You know, I mean, if someone knows me, if people know what I've done, when I'm involved in some things, I make things happen. I believe this can happen, but it's only going to happen if you're going to support, whether you give financial support, emotional support, symbolic support, anything at all that you think that could contribute to do this. Because I'm telling you, when that thing is, when it's unveiled, you'll be saying to yourself, I was there, I contributed to that, I support this initiative. It's very similar to the Mary Seacole statue. A lot of people have been involved in raising money, doing things behind the scenes, lots of things to support it. So when people go down to see the statue, people touch Mary Seacole, they look at it. Some people spend hours there. Yeah. It would have, the Windrush anchor will have the same impact as well.
It will have a galvanizing impact with that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we're here to make connections work. Absolutely.
That's what it's all about. And I just want to thank you, Rudy, for your tireless work over many decades in the whole stuff you do around diaspora. And you know, who knows? I mean, there might be people that watch this from different parts of the world saying, this is fantastic. You know, I mean, I know for a fact that if we were in America, that statue, that anchor would be raised a long time ago.
Being raised.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
So why can't we do this, people in the UK?
Yeah, we can do it. We can do it. So thank you very much, Patrick, and good evening, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again soon. We will keep you updated on all the activities relating to the Windrush Anchor Memorial Project. We're going to make that 4 words that is inculcated throughout our communities. That's really important, is to get the name out there. Windrush Anchor Memorial Project. There'll be a short statement for people so that they can understand it very clearly. They can share it across all platforms. There'll be a website with the details. The link will be easily available, the Just Giving link. So we're going to make sure that we do our best to get this project over the line. So thank you very much, Patrick, David, and those of you who've joined us this evening. Good night.